I buried my husband 6 months ago, and I have not cried once. I do not know what is wrong with me. I just need someone to talk to. Do you mind being that person?
Some people carry their whole life in the way they sit down. The weight of it, the years, the losses, the particular shape of what they have survived shows up in the moment before they open the menu, in the way their hands rest on the table, in the specific quality of stillness that settles over them when nobody is looking. A good waitress notices this. A great one knows what to do with it. Nora Hayes had been a great waitress for 11 years. She just did not know yet that the woman who sat down at table 7 on a Tuesday evening in October was about to make that fact matter in ways Nora had never imagined. The Linden was not the kind of restaurant that had table numbers. It was the kind of restaurant that had a maitre d' named Philippe who had been in the same position for 19 years, and who knew the name of every regular and the preference of every name, and who moved through the dining room with the specific unhurried authority of someone who understood that the highest form of service was invisibility. The Linden sat on the ground floor of a restored 1920s building on Fayetteville Street in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina, and had been awarded its third Michelin star 4 years ago, and had maintained it with the quiet, consistent excellence of a place that had nothing to prove and knew it. Nora Hayes had worked at the Linden for 11 years, which meant she had been there since before the first Michelin star, which meant she had watched the restaurant become what it was from the inside, which meant she understood its rhythms and its expectations, and its particular standard of perfection, the way a musician understands the instrument they have been playing for a decade. She was 38 years old, dark-haired, with the specific physical economy of someone accustomed to being on their feet for 10 hours and having learned to carry themselves in a way that conserved energy without sacrificing presence. She was efficient without being cold, warm without being familiar, the specific combination that made regulars request her section and new guests become regulars. Table 7 was in the northeast corner of the dining room, not the most prestigious table, not the window seat or the private booth in the back, but the corner table that had a quality of gentle enclosure, a sense of being slightly apart from the room without being removed from it. Nora had a theory about the people who ended up at table 7. They were almost always alone. They were almost always carrying something. They were almost always people who needed to be somewhere that was not their home, but did not want to be somewhere that required performance. The woman who sat down at table 7 on the Tuesday in October was alone, carrying something, and very clearly did not want to perform. She was perhaps 60, Nora estimated, though the estimate was complicated by the specific quality of the woman's appearance, which suggested that 60 was younger than it looked on her today. Silver-haired, cut close and precise, wearing a dark coat that was expensive in the quiet, unannounced way of things that do not need to declare their cost, no jewelry except a plain watch on her left wrist. She sat down, put her bag on the chair beside her, looked at the menu for approximately 3 seconds, closed it and looked at the window. Not at the room, at the window. At the reflection of the dining room in the dark glass, which showed her everything around her without requiring her to face any of it directly, Nora came to the table. "Good evening. Can I start you with something to drink?" The woman looked up. Her eyes were the specific kind of direct that comes from spending decades in rooms where directness was the only currency that held its value. "Sparkling water, and whatever you think is best tonight. I'm not particular. Do you have any preferences?" Dietary restrictions. No restrictions. Surprise me. Nora noted this. People who said surprise me in a restaurant like the Linden were one of two things, either deeply comfortable with money and accustomed to deference, or so exhausted by having to make decisions that they had simply run out of the capacity for one more. This woman was the second kind. Nora could see it in the way she had looked at the window instead of the room. The window was easier. The window showed you the world at a remove. "I'll take care of you," Nora said, and went to the kitchen. She came back with sparkling water and a small amuse-bouche that the chef, Marco, had prepared with the specific inspiration of someone who had heard there was a guest who wanted to be surprised. The woman ate it slowly, with the attention of someone who was actually tasting rather than consuming, and when Nora brought the first course she said, "What is your name, Nora? How long have you worked here, Nora?" 11 years. Woman looked at her. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, more like a recalibration, the specific adjustment of someone who has received information they did not expect and are deciding what to do with it. "That's a long time to be in one place." "It's a good place," Nora said. "Can I get you anything else?" "No, thank you." Nora left the table, but she looked back once from across the room, and the woman was looking at the window again, at the reflection of everything around her. At the room she was in and not quite in at the same time. The woman came back the following Tuesday. Same time, 7 p.m. Philippe guided her to table 7 without being asked. He had the memory of 19 years and knew that people who come back to the same table are telling you something. Nora was her server again, and the second time was different from the first in the specific way that second conversations are always different. The distance of the first meeting replaced by the slight warmth of recognition, both of them knowing a little more about what they were dealing with. "Nora," the woman said when she approached, "you remembered me. I remember all my regulars. Been here twice." "You're becoming regular," Nora said, and the woman smiled a small smile, the smile of someone who has not smiled easily in a while and is surprised to find it happening. Her name was Catherine. She offered it midway through the meal when Nora brought the second course, the way people offer their names in the second conversation when they have decided that the other person has earned it. "Catherine Elroy." She said it simply, without the additional information that people with significant names sometimes offer, the clarifying context, the dropped reference, the implicit invitation to recognize. Just Catherine Elroy, as if it were an ordinary name belonging to an ordinary woman at an ordinary table. Nora did not recognize it. She went home that evening and typed it into her phone, sitting at the kitchen table of the 2-bedroom apartment she shared with her 17-year-old daughter Jade. And the search results came back in approximately 1 second with approximately 47,000 results, and Nora sat with her phone in her hand for a long time. Catherine Elroy was the founder and retired CEO of Elroy Capital Group, one of the largest private investment firms in the Southeast. She had built it from a 2-person operation in Charlotte in 1989 into a firm managing $11 billion in assets at its peak. She had sold her controlling stake 8 years ago. She had been on the board of 3 hospital systems, 2 universities, and the North Carolina Arts Council. She had been profiled in Forbes, Fortune, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. She had a net worth that the various estimates placed somewhere between $800 million and $1.2 billion depending on the source and the year. She was also, according to an article from 14 months ago in the Charlotte Observer, recently widowed. Her husband of 31 years, a physician named Robert Elroy, had died of pancreatic cancer. The article was brief and factual and described the marriage in 2 sentences and the professional legacy in 12, which told Nora something about the publication and something about Catherine Elroy, who was the kind of woman whose marriage was a footnote in her own story even when the story was about her loss. Nora put her phone face down on the kitchen table. She thought about the woman looking at the window, about the weight in the way she sat down, about the surprise me, said not with entitlement but exhaustion. Then Jade came out of her bedroom with a textbook and sat across from her mother at the kitchen table and said, "You okay?" And Nora said, "Fine. How's the calculus?" And they sat together at the table, and Nora helped Jade with the calculus and did not think about Catherine Elroy again until the following Tuesday. Nora said nothing about what she knew. This was a decision she made specifically and consciously on the Tuesday morning before Catherine's 3rd visit, sitting with her coffee before Jade was awake, turning the question over. Catherine had not offered her full name as a disclosure. She had offered it as an introduction, the normal human gesture of one person telling another person what to call them. The fact that the name was attached to $11 billion and 47,000 search results was not something Catherine had chosen to share. It was something Nora had found by looking, and there was a category of information Nora believed that you were entitled to find but not entitled to use. Catherine Elroy sat at table 7 because table 7 felt safe. Using what she knew would make it less safe. Nora would not do that. She came on Tuesdays, always alone, always at 7, always table 7, which Philippe now held for her as a matter of course. The meals lengthened gradually, not because Nora prolonged them, but because Catherine began to linger, to take her time between courses, to sit with her coffee afterward rather than asking for the check the moment she finished. She began to talk more. Not confessionally. Catherine was not a confessor. Nora could see that, but in the specific way of someone who has spent a long time being very efficient with words in professional contexts and is discovering, in this corner table on Tuesday evenings, that inefficiency with words has its own value. She talked about Robert. Not constantly, not with the obsessive circling of fresh grief, but with the particular quality of a woman who is still locating the shape of an absence that has reorganized everything around it. She talked about the firm, not with nostalgia, but with the specific honest assessment of someone taking stock of what the work had cost and whether the cost had been worth it. She said once, looking at her wine glass, "I was very good at my work. I wonder sometimes if that was the best of me or whether the best of me was happening somewhere else and I was too busy to notice." Nora said, "What do you think was happening somewhere else?" Catherine looked at her. "My daughter," she said. "Eleanor, she's 32. She lives in Asheville. We don't." She stopped, looked at the window. "We don't speak much." Nora did not ask why. She brought the next course and the conversation moved on, and Catherine finished her meal and thanked Nora with the specific genuine warmth of someone who means it and left. Nora cleared the table. Found, under the edge of the plate, a folded $50 bill left in addition to the 20% tip already on the check. This happened every week. Nora had started putting the 50s in an envelope at home without spending them, not because she was saving them for anything specific, but because they felt like they belonged to a different category than the money she earned. They felt like something she needed to think about before she used them. Jade Hayes was 17 years old and had the specific focused intelligence of a child who has watched her mother work hard for a long time and has decided, at a cellular level, that working hard is the organizing principle of a life. She was a junior at Millbrook High School, taking 4 AP classes, working Saturday mornings at the public library, and applying to 8 universities with the methodical thoroughness of someone who had learned thoroughness from the person who raised her alone. Nora had raised her alone since Jade was 4, since the specific Tuesday morning when Jade's father Marcus had explained, in the careful language of a man who had rehearsed what he was going to say, that he needed something different from his life, and that different did not include Fayetteville Street and the Linden and the 2-bedroom apartment. He was in Charlotte now. He called on birthdays. Jade had made her peace with it by the time she was 12 in the specific way of children who are too busy becoming themselves to spend energy on people who chose not to stay. What Jade needed, in October of her junior year, was a scholarship. Not because Nora could not cover tuition. Nora had been careful with money for 11 years, and the envelope under the bathroom sink contained more than most people assumed a waitress could accumulate. But because the universities Jade was applying to had costs that careful money did not fully reach, and because a scholarship for a student with Jade's record was not charity, it was recognition, and Jade deserved recognition. The Elroy Foundation offered 3 full scholarships annually to North Carolina high school students, demonstrating exceptional academic achievement and financial need. Nora had not known this until she found it on the foundation's website on a Thursday night, sitting at the kitchen table after Jade was asleep, 2 months into Catherine's Tuesday visits. She sat with this information for a long time. Then she closed the laptop and went to bed. She did not tell Jade about the scholarship. She did not tell Catherine about Jade. She kept the two things in separate rooms in her mind and did not open the door between them because opening the door between them was the kind of move that changed the nature of what she and Catherine had built at Table 7 from something genuine into something transactional. Nora would not do that either, but she thought about it. Every Tuesday she thought about it, and every Tuesday she said nothing. The Tuesday in December when everything shifted started the same way all the Tuesdays started, Catherine at 7, Table 7, Philippe guiding her across the dining room with the specific gentle authority of a man who has been doing this for 19 years. But Catherine sat down differently that evening. Not the weight of the earlier Tuesdays, something more acute, something that was fresh rather than accumulated. Nora brought the water and said nothing and waited. "Alina called today," Catherine said when Nora set down the first course. "How was that? Difficult, necessary." She looked at the plate without seeing it. "She said things that were true. I said things that were inadequate, which is apparently what I do, build a career on the precision of language and then become completely inarticulate with the people who matter." She picked up her fork. "She's pregnant. I'm going to be a grandmother." "Congratulations," Nora said. Catherine looked up. Something in Nora's voice, the simple directness of it, the absence of the particular kind of performed warmth that the word congratulations usually carried, made her look up. "Yes," she said. "I think so. I hope so. I have to earn it." "What does earning it look like?" "Showing up," Catherine said. "According to Alina, just showing up and staying, which apparently I have not been good at." She put her fork down. "I was at the firm until 9 p.m. the night my daughter graduated from college. I had a board meeting. I sent flowers." She said this without self-pity, as a fact, delivered with the specific honesty of someone who has stopped defending the indefensible. "Robert always said I would figure out what mattered when the other things stopped demanding my attention. He was right. I just wish he were here to be right in front of me rather than—" She stopped. Looked at the window. Nora sat down in the chair across from Catherine, not on her break, not with Philippe's permission. Just sat down because the moment required it, and Nora had spent 11 years developing the judgment to know what moments required. "My daughter is 17, Nora said. "I have been here since she was 6. There have been school plays I missed for double shifts and parent-teacher conferences I rescheduled for Friday nights in December, and one birthday, her 12th, that I worked because we needed the money and I thought I would make it up to her, and I never fully did." She paused. "She turned out extraordinary anyway, not because of what I missed, because of what I showed up for. The showing up is what stays." Catherine looked at her. "You're telling me it's not too late." "I'm telling you what I know from my own life," Nora said, "which is that the showing up is what stays." She stood up, smoothed her apron, and went back to the kitchen. Philippe looked at her from across the room with the expression of a man who had seen everything in 19 years and had just seen something new. Nora looked back at him. Philippe nodded once. That was all. Catherine called Alina the following morning, not a text, not an email, a phone call, the specific deliberate choice of a medium that required both people to be present simultaneously and could not be composed and edited and revised before sending. Alina answered on the third ring with the careful voice of someone who had learned to be careful with her mother. Catherine said, "I want to come to Asheville this weekend if you'll have me. Not to talk about the past, we've talked about the past. I want to talk about the baby, about what you need, about what showing up looks like for me from here." There was a silence. Then Alina said, "Saturday." Catherine drove to Asheville on Saturday and stayed through Sunday evening and called Nora on Monday morning, not to the restaurant, to Nora's personal number, which she had acquired from Philippe with the specific directness of a woman accustomed to getting the information she needed. "I wanted to tell you," Catherine said, "that it went well, better than well. Alina made me hold the ultrasound photograph for 20 minutes and tell her what I saw in it." "What did you see?" "Someone I get to show up for," Catherine said. From the beginning this time, Nora was standing in her kitchen in her robe with her coffee, Jade still asleep down the hall. "I'm glad," she said. "I'm really glad." "Nora." A pause. "How is your daughter?" The question landed in the specific way of a question that has been thought about before it was asked. Nora looked at the hallway, at the closed door of Jade's room. "She's extraordinary," Nora said. "She's applying to universities. She wants to study environmental science." "Where is she applying?" Nora listed 4 of the 8. Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Those are excellent programs," she said. "She sounds like someone who knows what she wants." "Does," Nora said. "She always has." They talked for 20 more minutes about things that were not Jade and not a leaner, and not the Elray Foundation, and not the envelope under the bathroom sink. Then Catherine said goodbye and Nora put her phone on the counter and looked at the hallway for a long time. Jade found the envelope in February. Not the one under the bathroom sink. That one Nora had moved to the closet shelf after the 4th month, when it had grown too thick to comfortably pretend it was not there. The envelope Jade found was on the kitchen table on a Saturday morning in February when Nora was at the Linden for a rare weekend lunch shift. It was addressed to Jade Hayes from the Elray Foundation, and it had been opened. Nora had opened it Friday evening after Jade was asleep, read it twice, put the letter back in the envelope, and left it on the table for Jade to find. The letter informed Jade Hayes that she had been selected as a recipient of the Elray Foundation's annual scholarship for exceptional academic achievement and demonstrated financial need, providing full tuition, room, board, and fees for 4 years of undergraduate study at the institution of her choice from among the Foundation's partner universities, 3 of which were on Jade's application list. Jade called Nora at the restaurant at 9:15 a.m. Nora stepped into the back corridor to take the call and Jade said, "Mama, did you know about this?" And Nora said, "I found out last night." And Jade said, "Did you apply for this? Did you do something?" And Nora said, "I didn't apply for anything. I didn't do anything." And Jade was quiet for a moment and then Jade said, "Mama, this is the Elray Foundation, Catherine Elray, the billionaire." And Nora said, "I know who Catherine Elray is." And Jade said, "How?" And Nora said, "She comes to the restaurant." And there was a long silence, and then Jade said quietly, "Did she do this because of you?" And Nora said, "I don't know." And this was true, she did not know, she had never asked. She had never told Catherine about Jade's applications or about the scholarship or about the envelope under the bathroom sink. She had kept the doors closed. "What I know," Nora said, "is that you earned it. Whatever happened, you earned it." And Jade said, "Mama." Nora said, "I know, baby, I know." Catherine came to the Linden on the following Tuesday and sat at table 7, and when Nora came to the table, Catherine said, "She got the scholarship." "Not a question. She got the scholarship," Nora said. "She has a remarkable application. The foundation committee scores them blind, no names, no photographs. Her essay was the highest scored submission in 3 years. Catherine looked at Nora steadily. "I recused myself from the committee the moment I realized who she was." Which was after the scoring. Everything was by the numbers. "I know," Nora said. "That's why I never said anything. I didn't want to change what the numbers said. You knew about the foundation." "I found it 4 months ago." "Said nothing." "Said nothing," Nora confirmed. Catherine looked at her for a long moment. "Why?" Nora thought about how to say it. "Because what we have at this table, whatever it is, I didn't want it to become something else. Something where you felt obligated or I felt like I was asking for something. It was worth more to me the way it was." Catherine was quiet. She looked at the window, the old reflex, the room at a remove. Then she looked back at Nora, which was the newer reflex, the one she was developing. "I would like to meet her," Catherine said. "Jade, if she's willing, not as a foundation donor, as someone who has been told she is extraordinary by her mother for 4 months and would like to confirm it in person." Nora smiled. "I'll ask her, Nora." Catherine's voice had the specific quality it acquired when she was about to say something she had been considering for a while. "What you said to me, in December, about the showing up being what stays." She paused. "I have been thinking about that every day since. It was the most useful thing anyone has said to me in the past 14 months, and I have been in therapy, which is saying something." Nora laughed. It was the full laugh, the one she did not perform, the one that was just the sound of something being genuinely funny. Catherine smiled at it, the smile of someone watching something real happen. "I'm glad it helped," Nora said. "You helped," Catherine said. "The other thing was incidental." Meeting between Jade and Catherine happened on a Sunday afternoon in March at the 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Raleigh that Nora had been careful about for 11 years. Catherine arrived at 2 p.m. in the silver car that Nora had seen from a distance, but never up close, carrying a small plant, a rosemary in a terracotta pot. the specific practical gift of someone who had asked herself what was useful rather than what was impressive. Jade opened the door and looked at Catherine with the direct assessment of a 17-year-old who had been told this woman was coming and had done her own research and was now cross-referencing the research with the person in front of her. Catherine looked back at Jade with the same directness. Then Jade stepped back and said, "Come in. I made tea." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Nora helped with calculus and opened scholarship letters, and kept her phone face down on Thursday nights, and they talked for 3 hours. Nora made tea and brought cookies and occasionally contributed to the conversation and mostly listened, which was what the afternoon required of her. Catherine asked Jade about the environmental science program, about the research she wanted to do, about the specific questions she was trying to answer with her work. Jade answered with the precision of someone who has thought about these questions enough to have actual answers rather than performed enthusiasm. At one point, Catherine said, "What made you interested in environmental science?" And Jade said, "My mom took me to the Neuse River when I was 8. There was a fish kill, thousands of dead fish on the surface from agricultural runoff. She explained what had happened and why, and I remember thinking, someone made this happen, and someone can make it unhappen. I wanted to be the someone who makes it unhappen." Catherine looked at Nora. Nora looked at her coffee. 8 years old, Catherine said. "Your mother took you to a river." "Took me everywhere," Jade said. "When she wasn't working, which she was working a lot, but when she wasn't, she was completely there. That's the thing about my mom. When she's there, she's completely there." Catherine said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Yes, I've noticed that too." Linden on the last Tuesday of April was the same as every other Tuesday, Philippe at the door. The specific warm, controlled atmosphere of a room designed for the precise experience it produced. The particular hum of a full dining room operating at the level of a place that had nothing to prove. Nora moved through her section with the economy of 11 years, the specific fluency of someone who knows their instrument completely. Catherine sat at table 7 at 7 p.m. She looked different from the woman who had first sat at this table in October, not younger, not lighter exactly, but more present. Less of the weight of someone carrying the past, and more of the forward-facing quality of someone who has made decisions about the future, and is living in the direction of them. She had been to Asheville 3 times since December. Eleanor's baby was due in June. Catherine had bought a house in Asheville, not a large one, a 2-bedroom near Eleanor's neighborhood, the specific practical decision of a woman who had decided that proximity was the first form of showing up. Nora brought the water. Catherine said, "I have something for you." She put an envelope on the table. Nora looked at it. "Catherine, it's not what you think," Catherine said. "Open it." Nora opened it. Inside was a card and a key. The card said, "The Linden has agreed to a new position, starting whenever you're ready, general manager. Full salary, benefits, equity stake. Philippe is retiring in June. He recommended you. He said, and I'm quoting directly because it's too good not to, he said you were the only person in 11 years who made him feel like the restaurant was in better hands than his own when you were in the room." Nora read the card twice, looked up. "You did this. Philippe identified you. The ownership agreed. I provided the financing for the equity component because Philippe asked me to and because it was the right thing." Catherine looked at her steadily. "You have been here for 11 years doing extraordinary work in a room where most people only see the surface of what you do. That is not a sustainable arrangement for someone with your capacity." "I like this room," Nora said. "You can still be in this room, in a different chair." Nora looked at the key, at the card, at the woman across the table who had come in October looking at a window instead of a room and was now looking directly at everything. "Why?" Nora said. "Because the showing up is what stays," Catherine said. "You showed up for me every Tuesday for 7 months. You showed up for your daughter for 17 years. You showed up for this restaurant for 11 years. She paused. "It is a very simple equation, Nora. People who show up deserve to have someone show up for them." Nora held the key in her hand. The dining room moved around her, the specific warm, controlled hum of a Tuesday at the Linden. Philippe moving through the room with his 19 years of authority, the tables full of people who had come to be in a place that knew what it was doing. She thought about the first Tuesday in October, about the woman who would not look at the room, about 11 years of Table 7 and the people who ended up there always alone, always carrying something, always needing the specific thing that Nora had learned over 11 years how to give. "I'll need to talk to Jade," she said, "of course. I have conditions." Catherine almost smiled. "I expected nothing less." "Table 7 stays mine," Nora said. "Whatever else changes, that table stays mine." Catherine looked at her. Then Catherine smiled, the full smile, the one that was not small or cautious, the one that had been getting larger since December, the one that was becoming her actual face rather than the one she wore when she was not sure it was safe to show the actual one. "Table 7, she said, "will always be yours." Nora put the key in her apron pocket, picked up her pad, looked at Catherine across the table with the specific warm directness of someone who has been completely present for 11 years and intends to keep being present for however many come next. "Now," she said, "can I tell you what Marco has done tonight that you are absolutely going to want to know about?" Catherine picked up her menu. "Surprise me," she said. "Some things do not change. The best ones don't."